Okay.
All right. So we're starting on the background on page 290. This is the opening of the eyes from Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, Volume 1. It's a very deep gosho. It's a very long gosho. It's a very important gosho. And it qualifies as much as anything the reality of being a Buddha in your present form. Because that Daishonin qualifies here that he is the Buddha of the latter day of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the subliminal reality that he kind of qualifies by the end. At the same time, so are you. Okay, you're a Buddha in the latter day, right?
Yeah.
So why do we have to suffer, or do the problems or issues that arise in our daily life disqualify us as being Buddhas in our present form? And that Daishonin is going to qualify here. No. That's where, again, I got into that other issue of quantum. So let me get started.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be going to this page here. So let me turn this upside down so it doesn't distract everybody. All right. Here we go. We're on page. No, I'm going to read the background.
Yeah.
The background is on, page 288. I misstated that. All right, background. This treatise is one of Nichiren Daishonin's 5 most important writings in which he reveals his identity as the Buddha of the latter day of the law, who possesses the 3 virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent. In the 2nd month of the 9th year of Bunei, 1272, still in exile under harsh conditions on Sado Island, the Daishonin completed this work in 2 volumes and addressed it to Shijo Kingo, one of his leading disciples in Kamakura, and a samurai who was in the employ of the ruling Hojo clan on behalf of all of his followers. When the Daishonin was taken to Tatsunokuchi in Kamakura in 1271, Shijo Kingo accompanied him, and we understand what Tatsunokuchi is, right? That's where they tried to behead him. Okay, it led to the Sado, the exile on Sado. Shijo Kingo accompanied him, all right, having resolved to die by his side, and personally witnessed his triumph over execution. He also had journeyed to Sado to visit the Daishonin in exile and sent his messengers to him with writings, materials, and other necessities, not just on Sado, but also on Minobu, right? He helped the Daishonin actually survive through his offerings and support. And he was a great leader. He did Shakabuku. The object of devotion for observing the mind, which is the last thing we all read together, written in 1271, clarifies from the viewpoint of the law the object of devotion that enables all people to attain Buddhahood, the Daimoku. The opening and the Gohonzon that contains the Daimoku. The opening of the eyes treats the same subject in terms of the person. That is, it shows Nichiren Daishonin to be the Buddha who would establish the object of devotion for all humankind to achieve Buddhahood. The object of devotion, and he wouldn't have created that if it wasn't possible for us to attain Buddhahood, right? If the point wasn't to attain Buddhahood in your present form, there would have been no reason or need for him to establish the object of devotion. Do you understand?
Can you just say that?
Yeah.
Can I say it again?
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, the things that he went through in the process of establishing his teaching validate that there is a functional reason for us to achieve Buddhahood, not just through worship of him. Okay? But in our own lives to replicate what he expressed with his life. Okay? Because I go back again to the orally transmitted teachings, point 13 in chapter 13, where they talk about Risoku and Kukyo Soku, which is the basis of Honmatsu Kyoto. Okay, that the common mortal and the Buddha are identical. Okay, so we're not talking about a special. The fact that he's the Buddha of the latter day of the law means he's the first. It means he's the one that opens the door and opens the way. But there's only one reason for him to do that. What is it?
To show others you can
For all of us to follow that same path. Okay? So, the object of devotion for observing the mind, written in 1273, clarifies from the viewpoint of the law the object of devotion that enables all people to attain Buddhahood. The opening of the eyes treats the same subject in terms of the person. That is, that it shows Nichiren Daishonin to be the Buddha who would establish the object of devotion for all humankind to achieve Buddhahood. The object of devotion is the embodiment of the Daishonin's enlightenment to Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the law implied in the depths of the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren Daishonin's life on the forbidding island of Sado was full of hardship, but his hut was open to wind and snow, and he lacked food, clothing, and writing materials. In addition to his physical suffering, he was greatly troubled by the news that many of his followers in Kamakura had abandoned their faith. Because they saw him have these problems, they assumed he must not be correct. All right? Feeling himself constantly facing the shadow of death, the Daishonin wrote this treatise to encourage his disciples as though it were his last will and testament. Because as he wrote it, when he wrote it, he had no assurance that he would get off of Sado Island. Okay, he wasn't like I see the future and I know I'm going to be fine and I'll just chant and everything will be okay. Much as we are when we face the Gohonzon with our problems. Okay, it's called Mugiwashin, doubt-free faith. Okay, Nichiren Daishonin later described his motives behind the work in his actions of the votary of the Lotus Sutra, which we've all read together at least once. After everyone had gone, do you remember us reading that? Do you remember that Gosho? The actions of the votary of the Lotus Sutra is almost like an autobiographical first-person writing that qualifies everything that he went through from him. If not, you should go look up the video. It's on video, so that makes it easy. After everyone had gone, I began to put into shape a work in 2 volumes called The Opening of the Eyes, that he describes this in the votary of the actions of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. After everyone had gone, I began to put into shape a work in 2 volumes called The Opening of the Eyes, which I had been working on since the 11th month of the previous year. I wanted to record the wonder of Nichiren, in case I should be beheaded. The essential message within this work is that the destiny of Japan depends solely upon Nichiren. A house without pillars collapses, and a person without a soul is dead. Nichiren is the soul of the people of this country. That was quote unquote. That's straight from the actions of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. The title, continuing now, the title of the Opening of the Eyes means to enable people to see the truth. What is the truth?
You are the Buddha exactly as you are.
You are the Buddha exactly as you are. Ri-soku and Kukyo-soku. Okay? In other words, to free people from illusions and distorted views which tell them that they aren't and they couldn't be, and it's kind of weird to say that I am, okay? And awaken them to an understanding of the correct teaching, which is to understand and believe the exact opposite of that. To understand I'm eternally endowed with the 3 bodies. I'm a disciple of the original teacher. I am a thus come one of original enlightenment. All right? As an understanding of the correct teaching and its correct teacher, the Daishonin, whose life is embodied in the Gohonzon itself. When we embrace it with doubt-free faith, and doubt-free faith is the important part because that's what unlocks the role. That's what unlocks the door. That's what makes us actual bodhisattvas of the earth. The work describes the role that Daishonin played in championing the supremacy of the Lotus Sutra and spreading its teachings as he himself viewed and experienced it. So this is, again, his understanding of perception based on everything that he had learned from studying all the other sutras and the Tentai school understanding from Tentai and Milo's clarifications that led Dengyo to his clarification. So this is all an extension of individuals who devoted their lives to the purpose of us realizing the truth of our true identity, that we're eternally endowed with the three bodies and that we can manifest Buddhahood in our present form. We don't have to wait until another lifetime, okay? And we don't have to be a certain kind of person to do that. We don't have to be priest-like. We don't have to follow a bunch of rules and regulations. A passage from the treatise reads, on the 12th day of the 9th month of the last year, between the hours of the rat and the ox, 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., this person named Nichiren was beheaded. He's talking about Sado Island, and it is his soul that has come to this island of Sado. It was through the Tatsunokuchi persecution that Nichiren Daishonin revealed his true identity as the eternal Buddha, the original teacher. This passage refers to the death of a common person named Nichiren and indicates that from then on, the Daishonin was to reveal in full his enlightenment as the Buddha of the latter day of the law. This was his realization, hey, I have a responsibility to all mankind to continue down the path that I've already started. Nichiren Daishonin begins the treatise with the words, there are three categories of people that all human beings should respect. They are the sovereign, the teacher, and the parent, from page 220, which is where we'll start. The three virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent are equated with the qualifications of a Buddha. The virtue of sovereign is the power to protect all living beings. The virtue of teacher is the wisdom to lead all to enlightenment, and the virtue of parent means compassion to nurture and support them. These three virtues constitute a theme that runs throughout this treatise, and at the conclusion of this work, the Daishonin declares, I, Nichiren, am the sovereign, teacher, and father and mother of all the people of Japan. At the outset, I have some more water here. Nichiren Daishonin discusses the preceding big ways of thought, Confucianism, Taoism, and Brahmanism, Hinayana and provisional Mahayana Buddhism, and then moves on to the Lotus Sutra. He attributes the disasters ravaging Japan to the confusion in Buddhism and the failure by both rulers and subjects to recognize the supremacy of the Lotus Sutra. Here he cites two reasons why the sutra is supreme. One is that the theoretical teaching, the first half of the Lotus Sutra, reveals that people of the two vehicles can attain enlightenment, a possibility utterly denied in the previous 42 years of the Buddha's preaching. This substantiates the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, as to why Ichinen and Sanzen can exist from Tentai's extrapolation. This substantiates the mutual possession of the 10 worlds and the statement that that Buddhahood is open to all. He talks about that in the second chapter. The other reason is that in the essential teaching, the latter half of the sutra, Shakyamuni Buddha proclaims that he first attained enlightenment in an unfathomably remote past, numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago. The Daishonin states that Shakyamuni Buddha himself declared that the Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and the most difficult to understand. So as we struggle to perceive the truth of our own lives, the teaching that qualifies that aspect that we're having trouble accepting, he is already declared in the sutra to be the most difficult to believe and most difficult to understand thing that there is. Okay, accepting your own Buddha nature, your own eternally endowed three bodies. In this sutra, the Buddha implied the supreme teaching is as stated. The doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is found only in one place, hidden in the depths of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Subsequently, he's saying that Ichinen Sanzen and Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are identical. The one's theoretical and the other one's the actualization, because you can't attain actual Buddhahood unless you chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The Daishonin, it's the latter, it's got to be in the 5th 500-year period and beyond, and so forth and so on, right? Mm-hmm. You understand why? Okay. The Daishonin takes the position that only the revelation of the truth of Buddhism can save the nation and the people. This conviction, he says, has moved him to propagate the essence of the Lotus Sutra in spite of the persecution that he knew he would incur. And I need to qualify this again. When he says save the people, his conviction, he says, moved him to propagate the essence of the Lotus Sutra in spite of the persecution he would incur in order to save the nation and the people. What is he qualifying that he's saving them from? Being trapped in the lower 6 worlds, allowing them to advance to the 4 higher worlds of voice hearers, cause awakened ones, Buddha, bodhisattvas, and Buddhahood. In other words, to escape always being a common mortal in every lifetime, and instead establish a foundation for becoming their true identity in every lifetime. Okay, and that's all causal, and that's all dependent origination. You got to know somebody that can teach you that, right? Okay. He realized that his followers might doubt him because of the apparent failure of the gods to protect a votary of the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, he stated, this doubt lies at the heart of this piece I am writing. So in other words, he says, I'm writing this so that you can have doubt-free faith in what I'm expressing to you. And because it is the most important concern of my entire life, he understands that's why he was born, was to do this. I will raise it again and again here and emphasize it more than ever before I attempt to answer it. The second part of the treatise discusses the emergence from the earth and the lifespan chapters of the Lotus Sutra, where Shakyamuni Buddha summons forth countless bodhisattvas from beneath the earth and reveals that he actually attained enlightenment in the remote past, numberless major world system dust particle kalpas, and that all the Buddhas of the other sutras are his emanations, and that all the bodhisattvas, his disciples. Nichiren Daishonin clarifies that the Buddha of the lifespan chapter is the teacher of all Buddhas. At this point, an implicit analogy begins to emerge. The doubt held by Shakyamuni's disciples about how he could possibly have taught the countless bodhisattvas of the earth in his life leads to the revelation of his true identity as the Buddha who attained enlightenment countless kalpas ago, numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago. Similarly, the doubt held by the Daishonin's followers about why he has been exiled and suffered so many persecutions leads to an understanding of his true identity as the Buddha of the latter day, the Buddha that would introduce the law that allows everybody to become the same as him, that activates the eternally endowed 3 bodies, that they can become Buddhas in their present form. Then the Daishonin mentions the principle of sowing, maturing, and harvesting. He points to the unsurpassed law whereby all Buddhas attain enlightenment, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and that's the whole point. The Daishonin says that even though I'm only revealing this now in the 5th 500-year period after the demise of the Buddha Shakyamuni, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the teaching by which all Buddhas throughout the 3 existences and the 10 directions all attain Buddhahood. So when Shakyamuni was practicing the Bodhisattva way, as he describes how long ago it's been in numberless major world system dust particle kalpas in chapter 15, he's discussing this reality that he actually attained Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And that's why Nichiren was able to divine, to understand, and to see, to bring out Nam-myoho Renge-kyo from the depths of the 16th chapter. Okay, he didn't just pull it out of his butt. Okay, it's Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, this law is what lies in the depths of the lifespan chapter. This law, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nichiren Daishonin directly teaches this law, the true cause for attaining Buddhahood, and his Buddhism is called the Buddhism of sowing because it implants the seed of enlightenment in the lives of those who practice it. In this light, he possesses the three virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent for all humanity as a whole. Nichiren Daishonin explains that each sutra has its own claimed excellence. He also gives examples of statements in which various sutras assert their own superiority to other teachings. But the Lotus Sutra alone declares that it is supreme among all sutras, and the Daishonin confirms its supremacy. The Lotus Sutra speaks of the three powerful enemies of the sutra and prophesies opposition and hostility toward the sutra and its votary. All of us are the votaries as well. All this the Daishonin had himself encountered, all as is predicted in the sutra. As the votary of the Lotus Sutra, he vows to stake his life on the cause of saving all people, saying, "Let the gods forsake me, let all persecutions assail me, still I will give my life for the sake of the law. I will be the pillar of Japan. I will be the eyes of Japan. I will be the great ship of Japan. This is my vow, and I will never forsake it." And to a degree, that's what we all qualify as bodhisattvas of the earth, because we all ascribe ourselves to be disciples of Nichiren and prepared to deal with everything he had to deal with. That's why he's so cool in saying we're identical to him. He doesn't say we're less than him. He says we're the same as him. Okay? Then he assures his disciples that they will definitely attain Buddhahood as long as they do not permit themselves to be overcome by doubts, even when difficulties befall them. And difficulties will befall all of us. We all have to struggle.
Yes.
As part of life, as part of the validation of our identity, but moreover, our struggles help create our compassion for others, because it gives us a basis of understanding suffering in others. And where does wisdom come from?
Suffering.
Compassion.
Oh,
Compassion.
Yeah.
So actually, that's how we establish and create Buddha wisdom, is through the suffering, and then the resulting compassion and so forth. In the final section of this treatise, Nichiren Daishonin explains that there are two ways to propagate the Lotus Sutra: shoju, or gentle persuasion, and shakubuku, or strict refutation. Here the Daishonin argues that both methods should be used because there are two kinds of countries: those whose people are ignorant of the correct teaching of Buddhism, and those whose people deliberately oppose it. But Japan, as a nation that slanders the correct teaching, requires the shakubuku method. Then he concludes that to remove suffering and give joy to the people is the Buddha's teaching. The Daishonin has devoted himself to refuting and rooting out the causes of human misery. For him, the exile to Sado was only a small suffering in his life. Indeed, he feels great joy because of the results he is confident will come in the future. Okay, so that's the background. And we go on then to page 220, which I have to find now since I lost my place. Here we go. Okay, the opening of the eyes, page 220, part 1. There are three categories of people that all human beings should respect. They are the sovereign, the teacher, and the parent. There are three types of doctrines that are to be, there are three types of doctrines that are to be studied. They are Confucianism, Brahmanism, and Buddhism. Confucianism describes the three sovereigns, the five emperors, and the three kings, whom it calls the honorable ones of heaven. These men are depicted as the heads of the government officials and the bridges for the populace. In the age before the three sovereigns, in the age before Confucianism, people were no better than birds and beasts in that they did not know even who their own fathers were. Because what's Confucianism based on? It's all based on rules and regulations of civility. Okay, it's what established organized government. From the time of the five emperors on, they came to know who their fathers and mothers were from the time that Confucianism began to be embraced, treating them according to the dictates of filial piety. Thus, Chonghua served his father with reverence, though the latter was stubborn and hard-headed. Although the government of Pei, after he became the emperor, continued to pay great respect to his father, the venerable sire King Wu of the Chao dynasty made a wooden image of his father, and the Earl of the West, his father, the Earl of the West, and Ting Lan fashioned a statue of his mother. All these men are models of filial piety. And what's filial piety? It's the basis of your culture.
Follow parents.
Parent. Right. You have a devotion. You have a dedicated requirement. Okay, to support and respect and appreciate what gave you life. Okay, that's filial piety. That's what he's telling you is important. Okay, all right, we're filial. We're kids. Okay, the High Minister of Pekan, seeing that the Ying dynasty was on the path to ruin, strongly admonished the ruler, though it cost him his head. Hung Yin, finding that his lord, Duke Yi, had been killed, cut open his own stomach and inserted the duke's liver in it before he died. These men may serve as models of loyalty. That's of loyalty. That's not filial piety, right? Lin Shao, who was the emperor, the teacher of the Emperor Yao, Wu Qing was the teacher of Emperor Shun. Tai Kun Wang was the teacher of King Wen, and Lao Tzu was the teacher of Confucius. And of course, Lao Tzu is the guy that did Taoism.
Yeah.
These teachers are known as the four sages. Even the honorable ones of heaven bow their heads to them in respect, and all people press their palms together in reverence. Sages such as these have left behind writings that run to over 3,000 volumes in such works as the three records, the five canons, and the three histories. But all these writings in the end do not advance beyond the three mysteries. The first of the three mysteries is being. This is the principle taught by the Duke of Chao and others. The second mystery is non-being, which was expounded by Lao Tzu. The third is both being and non-being, which is the mystery set forth by Chuang Tzu. Mystery denotes darkness. Some say that if we ask what existed before our ancestors were born, we will find that life was born out of the primal force. The primal force, that sounds like a law. Okay, Myoho Renge. We find that they were born out of the primal force, while others declare that immanence and ignobility, joy and sorrow, right and wrong, gain and loss occur simply as part of the natural order. These are theories that are cleverly argued, but that fail to take cognizance of either the past or the future. Mystery, as we have seen, means darkness or obscurity, and for it, and for this reason, mystery, as we have seen, means darkness or obscurity, and it is for this reason that it is called mystery. It is a theory that deals with matters only in terms of the present. Speaking in terms of the present, the Confucians declare that one should abide by the principles of benevolence and righteousness, and thereby ensure safety to oneself and peace and order to the state. If one departs from these principles, they say, then one's family will be doomed and one's house overthrown. That's how they controlled the population, through rules and regulations. But although the wise and worthies who preached this doctrine were acclaimed as sages, in their lack of knowledge about the past, they are like the ordinary people unable to see their own backs. And in the understanding about the future, they are like the blind man unable to see what lies before him. If in terms of the present, one brings order to one's family, carries out the demands of filial piety, and faithfully practices the 5 constant virtues, then one's associates will respect one, and one's name will be known throughout the country. If there is a worthy ruler on the throne, he will invite such a person to become his minister or his teacher, or may even cede his position to him. Heaven too will come to protect and watch over such a person. Such were the so-called 5 elders who gathered about and assisted King Wu and of the Chao dynasty, or the 28 generals of Emperor Kuang-wu of the latter Han, who were likened to the 28 constellations of the sky. But since such persons know nothing about the past or the future, they cannot assist their parents, their sovereign, or their teacher in making provisions for their future lives, and are therefore unable to repay the debt they owe them. Such persons are not true worthies or sages. Confucius declared that there were no worthies or sages in his country, but that in the land to the west there was one named Buddha who was a sage. This indicates that non-Buddhist texts should be regarded as the first step toward Buddhist doctrine. Confucius taught propriety and music so that the Buddhist scriptures were brought to China. The concepts, the precepts, meditation, and wisdom could be more readily grasped. So that the concepts of precepts, meditation, and wisdom could be more readily grasped. He taught that the ideals of ruler and minister, so that the distinction between superior and subordinate could be made clear. He taught the ideal of parenthood, so that the importance of filial piety could be appreciated. And he explained the ideal of the teacher, so that the people might learn to follow. The great teacher Miolo says, the propagation of Buddhism truly depends on this. First, the teachings on propriety and music were set forth, and later the true way was introduced. Tiantai states, in the Golden Light Sutra it is recorded that all the good teachings that exist in the world derive from this sutra. To have a profound knowledge of this world is itself Buddhism. To understand things as they truly are is itself Buddhism. The great concentration and insight, that's Tiantai Makashikan, we read, I, the Buddha, have dispatched the 3 sages to educate the land of China. In the annotations on great concentration and insight, that's Miolo, we read, the practice of the pure law states that the Bodhisattva moonlight appeared in the land under the name Yin Hui. Bodhisattva bright pure appeared there as Confucius, and Bodhisattva Kashyapa appeared as Lao Tzu. Since the sutra is speaking from the point of view of India, it refers to China as that land. Secondly, we come to the non-Buddhist teachings of India. In Brahmanism, we find that the 2 deities, Shiva, who has 3 eyes and 8 arms, and Vishnu, they are hailed as the loving father and compassionate mother of all living beings, and are also called the honorable ones of heaven and sovereigns. In addition, there are 3 men, Kapila, Uluka, and Rishabha, who are known as the 3 ascetics. These ascetics lived somewhere around 800 years before the time of the Buddha. The teachings expounded by the 3 ascetics are known as the 4 Vedas, and the number 60,000. later, in the time of the Buddha, there were the 6 non-Buddhist teachers who studied and transmitted those non-Buddhist scriptures and acted as tutors to the kings of the 5 regions of India. There's teaching split into 95 or 96 different lines, forming school after school. The banners of their pride were raised higher than the heaven, where there is neither thought nor no thought, and their dogmatic rigidity was harder than metal or stone. But in their skill and depth of understanding, they surpassed anything known in Confucianism. They were able to perceive 2, 3, or even 7 existences, a period of 80,000 kalpas into the past, and they likewise knew what would happen 80,000 kalpas in the future. As the fundamental principle of their doctrine, some of these schools taught that causes produce effects, others taught that causes do not produce effects, while still others taught that causes do and do not produce effects. Such were the fundamental principles of these non-Buddhist schools that preceded Shakyamuni. The devout followers of the non-Buddhist teachings observe the 5 precepts and the 10 good precepts, practice a kind of meditation that is still accompanied by outflows, and according to the worlds of form and ascending to the worlds of form and formlessness, the threefold world, right? The world we're born into the world of desire, right? And then there's the world of form and formlessness, which the Daishonin says these guys all ascend to, only to find out it's a dead end and fall all the way back down. So, again, the devout followers of the non-Buddhist teachings observe the 5 precepts and the 10 good precepts, practice the kinds of meditation that is still accompanied by outflows and ascending to the worlds of form and formlessness, believe that they have attained nirvana when they reach the highest of the heavens, the world of formlessness. But although they make their way upward bit by bit like an inchworm, they fall back from the heaven where there is neither thought nor no thought, and descend instead into the evil paths, since not a single one succeeds in remaining on the level of the heavens, though they believe that once having attained that level, they will never descend from it. Each approves and practices the doctrines taught by his teacher and firmly abides by them. Thus, some of them bathe 3 times a day in the Ganges, even on cold winter days, while others pull out the hairs on their head, fling themselves against rocks, expose themselves to fire, burn their bodies, or go about stark naked. Again, there are those who believe that they can gain good fortune by sacrificing many horses, or who burn grasses and trees, or make obeisance to every tree they encounter. Erroneous teachings such as these are too numerous to be counted. Their adherents pay as much respect and honor to the teachers who propound them as to the heavenly deities paid to Lord Chakra, or the court ministers paid to the ruler of the empire. But not a single person who adheres to these 95 types or higher or lower non-Buddhist teachings ever escapes the cycle of birth and death. Those who follow teachers of the better sort will, after 2 or 3 rebirths, fall into the evil paths, while those who follow evil teachers will fall into the evil paths in their very next rebirth. And yet, the main point of these non-Buddhist teachings constitutes an important means of entry into Buddhism. Some of them state 1,000 years from now a Buddha will appear in the world, while others state 100 years from now the Buddha will appear in the world. The Nirvana Sutra remarks, all of the non-Buddhist scriptures and writings in society are themselves Buddhist teachings, not non-Buddhist teachings. And in the Lotus Sutra it is written, before the multitude they seem possessed of the 3 poisons or manifest the signs of distorted views. My disciples in this manner used expedient means to save living beings. Thirdly, we come to Buddhism. One should know that the world-honored one of great enlightenment, Shakyamuni, is a great leader for all living beings, a great eye for them, a great bridge, a great helmsman, a great field of good fortune. The four sages and the five aesthetics of the Confucian and Brahmanical scriptures and teachers are referred to as sages, but in fact they are no more than ordinary people who have not yet been able to eradicate the three categories of illusion. They are referred to as wise men, but in fact they are no more than infants who cannot understand the principle of cause and effect. With their teachings for a ship, who could one ever cross the sea of the sufferings of birth and death? With their teachings for a bridge, could one ever escape from the maze of the six paths? Which was what I qualified to you. That's what Buddhism does for us. It allows us to escape the six paths. Okay, six paths. But the Buddha, with our great teacher, has advanced beyond even transmigration with change and advance, let alone transmigration with differences and limitations. He has wiped out even the very root of fundamental darkness, let alone the illusions of thought and desire that are minor as branches and leaves. This Buddha, from the time of his enlightenment at the age of 30 until his passing at the age of 80, expounded his sacred teachings for a period of 50 years. Each word, each phrase he spoke is true. Not a sentence, not a verse is false. The words of the sages and worthies preserved in the scriptures and teachings of Confucianism and Brahmanism, as we have noted, are free of error, and the words match the spirit in which they were spoken. But how much more true is this in the case of Buddhism, of the Buddha, who had spoken not a false word for countless kalpas. In comparison to the non-Buddhist scriptures and teachings, the doctrines that he expounded in a period of 50 or so years represent the great vehicle, the true words of a great man. Everything that he preached from the dawn of his enlightenment until the evening that he entered into nirvana is none other than the truth. However, when we examine the 80,000 teachings of Buddhism expounded during the period of 50 or so years by Shakyamuni and recorded in scriptures, we find that they fall into various categories such as Hinayana and Mahayana, provisional and true sutras, exoteric and esoteric teachings, detailed and rough discourses, true words and false words, correct and incorrect views. But among these, the Lotus Sutra alone represents the correct teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, the truthful words of the Buddhas of the three existences and the 10 directions. The world-honored one of great enlightenment designated a specific period of the preceding 40 years and more, and defined the various sutras preached during that period, numerous as the sands of the Ganges, as the sutras in which he had not yet revealed the truth. He said that in the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, right? He designated the Lotus Sutra, preached during the 8 years as the sutra in which he now must reveal the truth. Thus, many treasures, Buddha, came forth from beneath the earth to testify that all you have expounded in the Lotus Sutra is true. And the Buddhas who are emanations of Shakyamuni gathered together and extended their long, broad tongues up to the Brahma heaven in testimony. These words are perfectly clear, perfectly understandable, brighter than the sky on a clear day or like the full moon at midnight. Look up at them and believe them. And when you turn away, cherish them in your heart. The Lotus Sutra contains two important teachings: the Dharma Analysis Treasury, establishment of truth, precepts. The Lotus Sutra contains two important teachings: the Dharma Analysis Treasury, establishment of truth, precepts, Dharma characteristics. The three treatises schools have never heard even so much as the name of these teachings from the Lotus Sutra. The Flower Garland and True Words schools, on the other hand, have surreptitiously stolen these doctrines and made them the heart of their own teachings. The doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is found only in one place, hidden in the depths of the lifespan chapter. The thing that allows a common mortal to become a Buddha eternally is that Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and that's what he's referring to right now. So I'll say it again. The doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is found only in one place, hidden in the depths, not on the surface of the Lotus Sutra, hidden in the depths. What's hidden in the depths of the Lotus Sutra? Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Okay? Of the lifespan chapter, hidden in the depths of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu were aware of it, but did not bring it forth into the light. Tentai Chi-Chi alone embraced it and kept it ever in mind. The doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life begins with the concept of the mutual possession of the 10 worlds. No matter who we are, whether we're in hell or we're in the heavenly state, we still, we're bodhisattvas. We're actually Buddhas. The doctrine of all contain Buddhahood, right? The 10 worlds all contain Buddhahood, correct?
Yeah.
All right, so the doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life begins with the concept of the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, which is each 10 times 10. But the Dharma characteristics in 3 treatises schools speak only of 8 worlds and know nothing of the entirety of the 10 worlds, much less of the concept of the mutual possession, of their mutual possession. The Dharma Analysis Treasury, Establishment of the Truth, and Precept schools derive their teachers from the Agama Sutras, the Hinayana. They are aware only of the 6 worlds and know nothing of the other 4 worlds, right? They don't talk about becoming a Buddha at all, all right? They declare that in all the 10 directions there is only one Buddha, and do not even preach that there is any other Buddha in any of the 10 directions, or of the principle that all sentient beings are alike, possess the Buddha nature. They, of course, say nothing at all. They refuse to acknowledge that even a single person possesses the Buddha nature. In spite of this, one will sometimes hear members of the Precepts and Establishment of the Truth declaring that there are Buddhas in the 10 directions, or that all living beings possess the Buddha nature. And at that point in time, they're pulling stuff out of their butt. That's not in their teaching. Okay? This is because the teachers of these schools, who appeared after the passing away of the Buddha, had stolen these Mahayana doctrines and incorporated them into the teachings of their own schools. To illustrate, in the period before the appearance of Buddhism, the proponents of the non-Buddhist teachings in India were not so bound up in their own views. But after the appearance of the Buddha, when they had listened to and observed the Buddhist teachings, they became aware of the shortcomings of their own doctrines. Then they conceived the clever idea of appropriating Buddhist teachings and incorporating them into their own doctrines, and as a result, they fell into an even deeper error than before. That's slander. These are examples of the errors known as appropriating Buddhism or plagiarizing Buddhism. The same theme occurred in the case of the non-Buddhist scriptures in China. Before Buddhism was brought to China, Confucianism and Taoism were rather naive and childish affairs. But when in the later Han, Buddhism was introduced to China and challenged the native doctrines. In time, as Buddhism became more popular, there were certain Buddhist priests who, because they had broken the precepts, were forced to return to secular life, or who had elected to join forces with the native creeds. Through such men, Buddhist doctrines were stolen and incorporated into Confucianism and Taoist teachings. In Volume 5 of Great Concentration and Insight, we read, that's Tiantai, right? These, the Samaka Shikan, with these days there were many devilish monks who break the precepts and return to lay life. Fearing that they will be punished for their actions, they then go over to the side of the Taoists. Hoping to gain fame and profit, they speak extravagantly of the merits of Lao Tzu and Zhuang Tzu, usurping Buddhist concepts and reading them into their erroneous scriptures. They twist what is lofty and force it into a mean context. They destroy what is exalted and drag it down among the base, striving to put the two on an equal level. On great concentration and insight, which was Myolo, comments on this passage as follows. Though they are monks, they destroy the teachings of Buddhism. Some break the precepts and return to lay life, as Wu Yun Sung did. Then as laymen, they work to destroy the teachings of Buddhism. Men of this kind steal and usurp the correct teachings of Buddhism and use them to supplement and bolster the erroneous teachings. The passage on twisting what is lofty means that adopting the outlook of the Taoists, they try to place Buddhism and Taoism on the same level, to make equals of the correct and the erroneous, though reason tells us that this could never be. Having once been followers of Buddhist teachings, they steal what is correct and use it to bolster what is incorrect. They twist the lofty 80,000 teachings of the 12 divisions of the Buddhist canon and force them into the mean context of Lao Tzu's 2 chapters and 5,000 words, using them to interpret the base and mistaken teachings of that text. This is what is meant by destroying what is exalted and dragging it down among the base. These comments should be carefully noted, for they explain the meaning of the foregoing description of events. The same sort of thing happened within Buddhism itself. Buddhism was introduced to China during the Yunping era of the latter Han Dynasty, and in times established its supremacy over Confucian and Taoist teachings. But differences of opinion developed within Buddhism, resulting in the 3 schools of the South and the 7 schools of the North, which sprang up here and there like so many orchids or chrysanthemums. In the time of the Qin and Sui dynasties, however, the great teacher Qi Tiantai defeated these various schools and returned Buddhism once more to its primary objective of saving all living beings. Later, the teachings of the Dharma characteristics and true word schools were introduced from India, and the flower garland. Later, by the way, again, that's the whole reason they got in. Later, the teachings of the Dharma characteristics and true word schools were introduced from India, and the flower garland school also made its appearance. Among these schools, the Dharma characteristics school set itself up as an arch opponent of the Tiantai school, because their teachings are as contrary to each other as fire is to water. However, when the Tripitaka master Xuanzong and the great teacher Lao Tzu or Tzu-in closely examined the works of Tiantai, they came to realize that the views of their own school were in error. Although they did not openly repudiate their own school, it appears that in their hearts they switched their allegiance to the Tiantai teachings. From the beginning of the flower garland and the true word schools the flower garland and true word schools were both provisional schools based upon provisional sutras coming from India. But the Tripitaka master Shamu Wei and Qing Kangxi, who introduced the esoteric true word teachings to China, usurped the Tiantai doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life derived from the Lotus Sutra and made it the core of the teachings of their school, adding the practice of mudras and mantras, moving their fingers around and making hand signals, and convincing themselves that their teachings and magical incantations, convincing themselves that their teachings surpassed Tiantai's because they had a lot of cool stuff nobody else knew. As a result, students of Buddhism, unaware of the real facts, came to believe that the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life was to be found in the Mahavajrayana Sutra, and that had been brought from India. Similarly, in the time of in the time of the flower garland patriarch Qing Quan, the Tiantai doctrines of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life were surreptitiously incorporated and used to interpret the passage in the Flower Garland Sutra that reads, "The mind is like a skilled painter." People were unaware that this was what had happened. had happened. They assumed that had always been the case, that was the correct understanding of that phrase from the Flower Garland Sutra, and so they thought all of these are equal, and they were not. People were unaware that this was what had happened. In the case of our own country, of Japan, the Flower Garland and the other schools that comprise the 6 schools of Nara were introduced to Japan before the Tentai or Tendai and the True Word schools. The Flower Garland, 3 treatises, and Dharma characteristic schools argued and contended as inimical to one another, as fire and water. When the great teacher Dengyo appeared in Japan, he not only exposed the errors of the 6 schools, but also made it clear that the True Word school had stolen the principles of the Lotus Sutra as expounded by Tentai and made them the heart of the teachings of their own school. The great teacher Dengyo set aside the various tenets proposed by the leaders of the other schools and solely in light of the sutras attacked their views. As a result, he was able to defeat the 8 eminent priests of the 6 schools, then 12 priests of then 4 and then 14, then over 300, as well as the great teacher Kobo. Soon there was not a single person in all Japan who did not acknowledge allegiance to the Tendai school that Dengyo had established, and the great temples of Nara, Toji, and other temples throughout the provinces became subordinate to the head temple of the Tendai school at Mount Hiei. The great teacher Dengyo also made it clear that the founders of the various other schools in China, by acknowledging allegiance to the doctrines of Tentai, had escaped committing the error of slandering the correct teaching of Buddhism. Later, however, conditions in the world declined and the people became increasingly shallow in wisdom. They no longer studied or understood the profound doctrines of the Tendai school, and the other schools became more and more firmly attached to their own prejudiced views. Eventually, the 6 schools and the True Word school turned upon and attacked the Tendai school, and later, growing ever weaker in the end, this is when they took over Mount Hiei. Okay, this is Jikaku and Chisho, going from being full-blown Lotus Sutra to including the True Word teachings in Mount Hiei. Okay, this is when that contamination occurred that the Daishonin spent his whole life repudiating. The latter, growing ever weaker in the end, and found that it was no match for the other schools. To aggravate the situation, absurd new schools such as Zen and Pure Land appeared and began attacking the Tendai school as well. And more of its lay supporters transferred their allegiance to these erroneous schools. In the end, even those priests of the Tendai school, who were looked up to as men of eminent virtue, all admitted defeat and lent their support to these schools, not only Tendai, but True Word and the 6 schools as well were forced to yield their lands and estates to these new misguided schools, the Nimbutsu and the True Word, or the True Word and the True Word and Zen. Okay, not only Tendai but True Word and the 6 schools as well were forced to yield their lands and estates to these new misguided schools, and the correct teachings from the Lotus Sutra fell into oblivion. As a result, the Sun Goddess and the God Hachiman, the Mountain King on Mount Hiei, and the other great benevolent deities who guard the nation, no longer able to taste the flavor of the correct teaching, departed from the land. Demons came forward to take their place, and it became apparent that the nation was doomed. Here, with my humble outlook, I have considered the differences between the teachings expounded by the Buddha Shakyamuni during the first 40 and more years and those expounded in the Lotus Sutra during the last 8 years of his life. Although both differ in many ways, contemporary scholars have already expressed the opinion, and it is my conviction as well, that the chief difference lies in the fact that the Lotus Sutra teaches that persons of the two vehicles can attain Buddhahood, and that the Buddha Shakyamuni in reality attained enlightenment at an inconceivably distant time in the past. And what he's really been qualifying all this time is that he's explaining why now his new teaching of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo must replace the 28 chapter Lotus Sutra, because it's all become so polluted and convoluted that it's no longer the correct teaching for the time. And it was also prophesied in the Great Collection Sutra that the Great Pure Law would appear. And that's what he's qualifying all of his study and all of this history that he's just given you to qualify. I didn't just make this up. Okay? All right. So, it is my conviction as well that the chief difference lies in the fact that the Lotus Sutra teaches that persons of the two vehicles can attain Buddhahood. And this is all about common mortals being able to attain Buddhahood in their present form. And that the Buddha Shakyamuni in reality attained enlightenment in the inconceivably distant time at an inconceivably distant time in the past. When we examine the text of the Lotus Sutra, we see that it predicts Shariputra, who shouldn't be able to attain Buddhahood because he's a cause awakened one, or he's a voice hearer, right? Shariputra will become the thus come one flower glow. That Mahakashayapa will become the thus come one light bright. Subhuti will become the thus come one rare form. Katyayana will become the thus come one Jabunda gold light. Madhyayana will become Tamalpatra, sandalwood fragrance Buddha. Purna will become the thus come one law bright. Ananda will become mountain sea wisdom unrestricted power king Buddha. Rahula will become the thus come one stepping on seven treasures flowers. The 500 and 700 voice hearers will become the thus come one's universal brightness, and 2,000 who have more to learn or do not have more to learn will become the thus come one's jewel sign. The nuns Mahaprajapati and Yoshodhara will become the thus come ones gladly seen by all living beings, and endowed with 1,000, 10,000 glowing marks, respectively. And so what's this significance that he's just qualifying here? Who are all those people that I just now talked about, that I just named the names of, and that I qualified the Buddha that they were predicted would become in the future? In the Lotus Sutra, in the theoretical teaching, Shakyamuni declares that all of these disciples that were voice hearer, cause awakened ones, and bodhisattvas would all someday become Buddhas. And in all of his teachings prior to that, he has said that they could never become Buddhas, that they had scorched the seeds of Buddhahood because they only cared about attaining enlightenment for themselves. They didn't have the Buddha capacity to have compassion and devote their lives to making others equal to themselves, which was the whole reason Shakyamuni started doing what he did. Okay? So that's what that was all about. All right. Now we're on page 227, and we're getting close, and we should hopefully get this done. But if you guys need to cut me off, we can. All right? So I don't know if you're going to run out of time for the video or not. But that's what all of this very confusing stuff has been qualifying. All right? Thus, if we examine the Lotus Sutra, we will realize that these persons are worthy of great honor. But when we search through the scriptures expounded in the period previous to the Lotus Sutra, we find to our regret that the situation is far different. The Buddha, the world-honored one, a man of truthful words, therefore, he is designated the sage and the great man. The Buddha, the world-honored one, is a man of truthful words. Therefore, he is designated the sage and the great man. In the non-Buddhist scriptures of India and China, there are also persons called worthies, sages, or heavenly ascetics because they speak words of truth. But because the Buddha surpasses all of these, he is known as the great man. When he expounded the Lotus Sutra, this great man said, "The Buddhas, the world-honored ones, appear in the world for one great reason alone, and that's to make everyone equal to them, Buddhas themselves also. He also said, I have not yet revealed the truth. The world-honored one has long expounded his doctrines and now must reveal the truth. And honestly discarding expedient means, I will now preach only the unsurpassed way. These are all the things that he said that undid all of the 40 years of teaching that had preceded that point. Okay? Are you understanding what this is saying and clarifying to you? Okay? All right. Many treasures Buddha then appears in the treasure tower in order to do what? In order to qualify that all this stuff that Shakyamuni is now saying that he's never said before is the truth. That's why he says, excellent, excellent Shakyamuni. Okay? So that's the whole point. Until the Lotus Sutra, this understanding of the truth that we all possess the Buddha nature did not exist, was not an open reality, and was not shared as such. The path to get to it, to go become a voice here, to become a cause awakened one, to become a bodhisattva, okay? Or cause awakened ones and voice hearers. Bodhisattvas would eventually, but not in a single lifetime, all right? And that's why he's saying, I now got to tell the truth. I've got to disavow everything that I've said up to this point, all right? So that's what this is explaining. Many treasures then, why did he appear? He appeared strictly to qualify that what Shakyamuni was saying, which was completely different than anything he'd ever said before, was really what the real truth was. Okay? Many treasures Buddha added his testimony to the words of the Buddha, and the emanation of the Buddha emanations of the Buddha put forth their tongues as a token of ascent. All of them had their long, broad tongues go up and reach the Brahma heaven in order to assert the truth of what Shakyamuni was now saying. Who then could possibly, continuing here on the second column of page 222, who then could possibly doubt that Shariputra will in the future become the thus come one flower glow? The Mahakashayapa will become the thus come one light bright, or that the other predictions made by the Buddha will come true. Who could dispute that? If many treasures has also come to say everything he's saying is a fact, then who could dispute that? Two Buddhas saying the same thing, right? Nevertheless, all the sutras preceding the Lotus Sutra represent the true words of the Buddha. The great and vast Buddha Flower Garland Sutra states, there are only two places where the great medicine king tree, which is the wisdom of the thus come one, will not grow and bring benefit to the world. It will not grow in the vast void that is the deep pit which persons of the two vehicles fall, or in the profoundly distorted and craving-filled waters wherein drown beings unfit for Buddhahood, who destroy their own roots of goodness. So in other words, he's qualifying. There are other sutras that all say you cannot become a Buddha if you're a voice here, cause awaken one, or those two, the people of the two, right? Voice hearers and cause awaken ones. The passage, continuing on page 227, this passage may be explained as follows. In the snow mountains, there is a huge tree that has numberless roots, and it is called the Great Medicine King Tree, and is the monarch of all the trees that grow in the land of Jampadvipa. It measures 168 yojanas in height. All the other trees and plants of Jampadvipa depend upon the roots, branches, and flowers and fruits of this tree to attain their own flowering and fruition. Therefore, this tree is employed as a metaphor for the Buddha nature, and the various other trees and plants stand for all living beings. But this great tree will not grow in a fiery pit or in a watery circle. The fiery pit is used as a metaphor for the mind of persons of the two vehicles, voice hearers and cause awakened ones. And the watery circle is a metaphor for the mind of the ekchantikas, or persons of incorrigible disbelief. The scripture says that because they're also excluded, right? They were also excluded. But the Lotus says even ekchantikas can. right? If they can somehow change the karma of being disbelievers and become believers, they can bring forth their Buddhahood. Okay, no one is excluded by virtue of what Nam-myoho Renge-kyo's teaching is. All right, the scripture is saying that these two categories of beings will never attain Buddhahood. Persons with the two vehicles, or Ekchantikas, persons of incorrigible disbelief. Continue on page 228. The Great Teacher, the Great Collection Sutra states there are two types of persons who are destined to die and not to be reborn. They are those who in the end will never be able to understand or repay their obligations. One is the voice here and the other is the cause awakened one. Suppose that a person falls into a deep pit. That person will be unable to benefit himself or to benefit others. The voice here and the cause awakened ones are like this. They fall into the pit of emancipation and can benefit neither themselves nor others. The more than 3,000 volumes of the Confucian and Taoist literature of China on the whole stress two principles, namely filial piety and loyalty to the sovereign. But loyalty is nothing more than an extension of filial piety. Filial piety may be described as lofty. Though heaven is lofty, it is no loftier than the ideal of filial piety. Filial piety may be called deep. Though earth is deep, it is no deeper than filial piety. Sages and worthies are the product of filial piety. It goes without saying, therefore, that persons who study the teachings of Buddhism must also observe the ideal of filial piety and understand and repay their obligations. Okay? The disciples of the Buddha must without fail understand the 4 debts of gratitude and know how to repay them. In addition, Shariputra, Mahakashayapa, and the other disciples who were persons of the two vehicles carefully observed the 250 precepts and the 3,000 rules of conduct, mastered the 3 types of meditation known as the flavor meditation, pure meditation, the free of outflows meditation, and the Agama Sutras, and freed themselves from the illusions of thought and desire in the threefold world. They must therefore have been models in the understanding and repaying of obligations. And yet the world-honored one declared that they were men who did not understand their obligation. They said this because when a man leaves his parents and home and becomes a monk, he should always have as his goal the salvation of his father and mother. But these men of the two vehicles, although they thought they had attained emancipation, did nothing to benefit others. And even if they had done a certain amount to benefit others, they had not led their parents to a path whereby they could never attain Buddhahood. Thus, contrary to one might expect, they became known as men who did not understand their obligation. In the Vilamakirti Sutra, which is a sutra about a dude named Vilamakirti who's asking a bunch of questions. In the Vilamakirti Sutra, we read, Vilamakirti once more questioned Manjushri saying, what are the seeds of Buddhahood? Manjushri replied, all the delusions and defilements are the seeds of Buddhahood. Even though a common person commits the 5 cardinal sins and is condemned to this hell of incessant suffering, he is still capable of conceiving the great desire for the way. The same sutra also says, good man, let me give you a metaphor. The plains and highlands will never bring forth the stems and blossoms of the blue lotus or the water lily, but the muddy fields of the low-lying and damp, that is where you will find these flowers growing. It also says, one who has already become an arhat and achieved the level of truth that goes with arhatship can never conceive the desire of the way and gain Buddhahood. He is like a man who has destroyed the five sense organs and therefore can never again enjoy the 5 delights that go with them. This is a point of why we do suffering. The point of this sutra is that the 3 poisons of greed, anger, and foolishness can become the seeds of Buddhahood. And the 5 cardinal sins, such as the killing of one's father and mother, of one's father, can likewise become the seeds of Buddhahood. What happened to King Ajatashatru? Right? He killed his father. Did he attain Buddhahood? Yes, he did. Okay, so even though if the high plane should bring forth blue lotuses, the persons of the two vehicles would never attain Buddhahood. The text is saying that when the goodness of the persons of the two vehicles is compared with the evils of the ordinary people, it will be found that though the evils of the ordinary people can lead to Buddhahood, the goodness of the persons of the two vehicles never can. The various Hinayana sutras censure evil and praise good, but in this sutra, Vilamakirti condemns the goodness of persons of the two vehicles and praises the evils of ordinary people. It would almost appear that it is not a Buddhist scripture at all, but rather the teachings of some non-Buddhist school. But the point is that it wants to make absolutely clear that the persons of the two vehicles can never become Buddhas, which the Lotus Sutra turns completely on its head. The correct and equal Dharani Sutra states, the Manjushri said to Shariputra, can a withered tree put forth new blossoms? Can a mountain stream turn and flow back to its source? Can a shattered rock join itself together again? Can a scorched seed send out sprouts? Shariputra replied, no. Manjushri said, if these things are impossible, then why do you come with joy in your heart and ask me if Buddhahood has been predicted for you in the future? He's saying to who was talking? Manjushri. Okay? The passage means that just as a withered tree puts forth no blossoms, Manjushri is a bodhisattva. He's talking to Shariputra, who's a voice for, excuse me. The passage means that just as a withered tree puts forth blossoms, a mountain stream never flows backwards. A shattered rock cannot be joined, and a scorched seed cannot sprout. So the person of the two vehicles can never attain Buddhahood. In their case, the seeds of Buddhahood have been scorched. The larger Wisdom Sutra reads, all you sons and gods, if you have not yet received the desire for perfect enlightenment, now is the time to do so. If you should not enter the realm of the enlightenment of voice hearers, you would no longer be capable of conceiving such a desire for perfect enlightenment. Why is this? Because you would be outside the world of birth and death, which itself would constitute an obstacle. This passage indicates that the Buddha is not pleased with the persons of the two vehicles because they do not conceive the desire for perfect enlightenment, but that he is pleased with the heavenly beings because they do conceive such a desire. The Shuramagama Sutra states, if a person who has committed the 5 cardinal sins should hear of this Shuramagama Sutra and should conceive the desire of supreme enlightenment, then he will still be capable of attaining Buddhahood. But world-honored one, an arhat, who has put an end to the outflows like a broken vessel and will never be capable of receiving and upholding this meditation. The Vilamakirti Sutra says, those who give alms to you are cultivating for themselves no field of good fortune. Those who give alms to you will fall into the evil paths. This passage means that the human and heavenly beings who give alms to the sage monks such as Mahakashayapa and Shariputra, people of the two vehicles, will variably fall into the 3 paths, evil paths. Sage monks such as these, one should suppose, must be the eyes of human and heavenly beings and leaders of all living beings, second only to the Buddha himself. It must be very much against common expectation that the Buddha spoke out time and time again against such men, even before great assemblies of human and heavenly beings, as we have seen him do. Was he really trying to reprimand his own disciples to death? In addition, he employed countless different metaphors in expressing his condemnation of the persons of the two vehicles, calling them donkey's milk as compared to cow's milk, clay vessels as compared to the vessels of gold, or the glimmer of a firefly as compared to the light of the sun. We finally got to the 10th page. He did not speak of this in 1 word or 2, in 1 day or 2, in 1 month or 2, in 2 years or 2, in 1 sutra or 2, but over a period of more than 40 years in countless sutras, addressing himself so to great assemblies of countless persons, condemning the persons of the two vehicles without a single extenuating word. Thus, everyone learned that this condemnation was true. Heaven learned it, and earth learned it. Not only one or two, but hundreds, thousands, and 10,000s of people, the heavenly beings, dragon gods, and the asuras of the threefold world, all the human and heavenly beings, persons of the two vehicles, the great bodhisattvas, gathered in assembly from the 5 regions of India, the 4 continents, the 6 heavens of the world of desire, the world of form and formlessness, and the worlds of the 10 directions, and learned and heard of it. Everybody knew it. Then all of these beings returned to their own lands, explaining the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha of the Sahya world, one by one to the inhabitants of their respective lands, so that there was not a single being in the countless worlds of the 10 directions who did not understand that Mahakashayapa, Shariputra, and those like them would never attain Buddhahood, and that it was wrong to give them alms and support. In the Lotus Sutra preached during the last 8 years of his life, however, the Buddha suddenly regretted and retracted his earlier position, and instead taught that persons of the two vehicles can in fact attain Buddhahood. Could the human and heavenly beings gathered in the great assembly to listen to him be expected to believe this? Would they not rather reject it, and in addition begin to entertain doubts about all the sutras preached in this and earlier periods? They would wonder if all the teachings put forth in the entire 50 years of the Buddha's preaching were not, in fact, false and erroneous doctrines. To be sure, there is a sutra passage that says, "In these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth." The Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, the intro to the Lotus. Nevertheless, one might wonder if the heavenly devil had not taken on the Buddha's form and preached the sutra in the last 8 years, the Lotus Sutra. In the sutra, however, the Buddha describes quite specifically how this disciple of the two vehicles will attain Buddhahood, and reveals the kalpas and the lands in which they will appear, the names they will bear, and the disciples they will teach. Thus it becomes apparent that Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, is saying two different things. This clearly means that he is contradicting his own words. That is why the Brahmanists laugh at the Buddhists and call him the great prevaricator. But just as the human and heavenly beings in the great assembly were feeling downcast in the face of this contradiction, okay, this would be again the ceremony there when he's talking about the great assembly. The thus come one many treasures, who dwells in the land of purity, treasure purity in the east, appeared in a huge tower adorned with the 7 kinds of treasure. This is a ceremony before it's in the air. And measuring 500 yojanas high and 200 yojanas wide, the human and heavenly beings in the great assembly accused Shakyamuni Buddha of contradicting his own words. And although the Buddha answered in one way or another, it was in considerable embarrassment, being unable to dispel their doubts. When the treasure tower emerged from the ground before him and ascended into the sky, it came forth like the full moon rising from beneath the eastern mountain in the dark of night, because the assembly hasn't all been raised to that level. That's why I said it hasn't started yet. The tower of the 8 kinds of treasures, the treasure tower, ascended into the sky, clinging neither to the earth nor to the roof of the heavens, but hanging in the midair, and from there a tower, a pure, and from within the tower, a pure and far-reaching voice issued, speaking words of testimony, as the Lotus Sutra describes it. At that time, a loud voice issued from the treasure tower, speaking the words of praise. Excellent, excellent Shakyamuni, world-honored one, that you can take the great wisdom of equality, Allah to instruct the Bodhisattvas, guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas and the Lotus Sutra of the wonderful law, and preach it for the sake of the great assembly. It is as you say, Shakyamuni, world-honored one, all that you have expounded is the truth. And I'll stop there. We'll get the next 10 pages when we get back together. Thank you.
Thank you.